Let me tell you something you probably don't expect to hear from someone like me. You've heard the headlines: SpaceX, Tesla, AI, Mars, Neuralink. You know the companies, the tech, the ambition. But what you might not know, what I rarely talk about, is that behind every so-called impossible project, every sleepless night, every time I stood at the edge of collapse and chose not to back down, there was a voice, not mine, not an investor's, not an algorithm's. It was the voice of a woman who never learned to read, a woman whose hands were worn from decades of work, a woman who prayed by a small window in Pretoria, South Africa, and taught me something I would forget and then desperately need. My grandmother, Karora. She taught me a prayer when I was 7 years old. 26 words that would disappear into the noise of my growing ambitions, only to resurface when everything I'd built was on the verge of collapse. This story isn't about religion. It's not about converting anyone. It's about remembering something ancient, something grounding, something that can cut through the anxiety and complexity of modern life. Because maybe, just maybe, the most powerful guidance isn't the loudest. It's the quiet voice you remember from your childhood. The one you ignored until life forced you to listen again. I was 7, staying at my grandmother's modest home in Pretoria. The year was 1978. She was already in her 70s, a survivor of wars, economic devastation, and personal loss that would have broken most people. But that's not how I remember her. She had peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the unshakable kind that grows in people who have faced everything and still found meaning. Every night, like clockwork after dinner and the dishes were cleaned, she would sit in her old wooden chair by the window, and she would pray. Not dramatically, not loudly, just soft, steady words spoken to what she called the Almighty. I was a curious kid, still am. And one night I asked her, "What are you saying when you sit there so quietly?" She looked at me, eyes full of something ancient, not just age, but understanding, and said, "I'm asking for guidance, child, to be shown the right path." "But what if God doesn't answer?" I asked with the kind of blunt honesty kids are famous for. She smiled, not a dismissive smile, a knowing one. "Oh, he always answers, Elon," she said. "But sometimes we're too busy talking to hear." That night, she taught me the prayer. She said the words slowly, and I repeated them after her, syllable by syllable. "Dear God, help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do. Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. Amen." 26 words. Simple, soft, almost childlike. But beneath those words was something I didn't understand, not then. Not for decades. For a long time, I didn't think about that prayer. I became a teenager, then an entrepreneur, then in the world's eyes, successful. PayPal, Zip2, the early seeds of what would become my life's work. I believed that if you were smart enough and worked hard enough, you could bend reality. Solve any problem. Hack your way through life's chaos. And it worked. For a while. But something was missing. It wasn't money. It wasn't status. It was direction. A deeper kind of direction. Not just where to go next, but why to go there at all. I rediscovered the prayer on a night I can never forget. December 2008. Tesla was weeks away from bankruptcy. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row. My entire PayPal fortune was gone, poured into ventures the world said were destined to fail. I was sitting in my office, 2:00 a.m., alone, surrounded by spreadsheets that screamed one word: failure. That's when I heard her voice. Not out loud, not some mystical moment. Just a memory as vivid as if she were right there beside me. "Help me to see what you see." And I remembered. The chair, the window. Her voice calm, certain, grounded. I whispered the prayer. the same way I had when I was 7. Dear God, help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do. And something shifted. Not the situation. Tesla was still almost bankrupt. SpaceX was still failing. But my perspective changed. What if this wasn't about saving companies? What if it was about something larger? What if it was about proving that humanity could move beyond fossil fuels? That private space travel was possible? That a small group of people with the right mission could outperform the titans? Give me the courage to follow where you lead even when I can't see the whole path. That line hit me like a lightning bolt. I had been demanding clarity before taking action. I wanted guarantees, blueprints, certainty. But the prayer was different. It wasn't about seeing the whole staircase. It was about taking the next step, the next right thing. The next morning, I didn't try to solve everything at once. For Tesla, the next step was one more call for emergency funding. For SpaceX, it was preparing for one final launch, using everything we'd learned from every failure. And then came the last line, and help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. That was the hardest part. I had always believed in sheer willpower, that you succeed by outworking everyone, that strategy and intelligence were enough. But this was something else. This was surrender, not weakness, but trust, a different kind of strength. The belief that even when your plan fails, there may be something better unfolding, something you can't yet see. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you let go of needing to control everything. It doesn't mean you stop trying. It doesn't mean you give up. It means you stop pretending you have to be God to do something meaningful. I used to think that power meant certainty, that leadership was about having all the answers. But I've learned something else. The leaders who make the biggest impact, they're not the ones who claim to know everything. They're the ones who keep moving forward even when they don't. That's what the prayer reminded me of. Not control, not domination, but trust in something beyond the spreadsheets, the press, the quarterly earnings reports. Something eternal. The fourth Falcon 1 launch, the one that had to work, didn't go perfectly. But it worked. It got to orbit. For the first time in history, a privately funded rocket delivered a payload to space. And just like that, SpaceX was no longer a dream, it was a reality. Tesla. It got the funding. Barely. A last-minute deal. Hours from shutting down. But again, it wasn't just about survival. It was about the why. The prayer had shifted my question from, how do I win, to what am I being called to do even if I lose? That's a different question. And when you ask it, your life takes a different shape. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing failure. You stop measuring your worth by success. Instead, you start listening not to noise, not to Twitter, not to headlines, but to that still small voice inside you. And if you're like me, maybe that voice came from a grandmother who never finished school, never got rich, but left behind something far more valuable. A simple prayer. People ask me, Elon, how do you handle the pressure, the criticism, the failures? I usually give a practical answer. But if you really want the truth, it's that prayer. I've said it thousands of times. In factories, in boardrooms, in rocket hangars, in the back seat of Teslas before investor meetings, sometimes whispering, sometimes pleading, sometimes just holding the words in my mind like a lifeline. Help me to see what you see, because we all get tunnel vision. We focus on what's urgent, not what's important. We chase what's loud, not what's lasting. But when you ask to see what God sees, even if you don't believe in Him, what you're really asking is, show me the bigger picture. Help me rise above my fear, my ego, my limits. Use me for something that matters. I'm not preaching. I'm not perfect. You know that my life's been messy, controversial, public in ways I never expected. But I'll tell you this, every single time I return to that prayer, especially when I least felt like praying, I found something. Not all at once. Not in burning bushes or signs in the sky. But in the next step. the next insight, the next dose of courage. And over time, those steps added up. That's how Tesla became profitable. That's how Starlink connected millions. That's how we're still pushing to put humans on Mars, not as an escape plan, but as a symbol of what humanity can do when we believe again. My grandmother is long gone now, but her voice isn't. It echoes in every challenge I face, every mission I take on, every moment I feel like I'm not enough. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this now, because someone out there, maybe it's you, is in the middle of your launch failure number 3. You've lost your funding, your confidence, maybe even your hope. And you don't need a masterclass in productivity. You need peace. You need direction. You need a reminder that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Dear God, help me to see what you see. Say it. Even if you don't believe it. Even if you're angry. Even if you're on the floor surrounded by the ashes of what you thought was your future. Especially then, because in the silence that follows, something might return to you. A voice. A memory. A path you couldn't see before. And it won't come with guarantees, but it might come with just enough light for the next step. People often assume I make decisions based on data models' projections. And yes, I use all of those, but that's not where I start. I start with the prayer. Help me to see what you see, because if I see wrong, I build wrong. If my vision is distorted by fear, pride, or greed, then no amount of intelligence will make the right choice. And that happens more often than we admit. We like to think we're rational, but we're driven by stories we tell ourselves, by wounds we haven't healed, by desires we don't question. So when I say that this prayer guides me, I mean it checks my ego. It slows me down when I want to rush. It reorients me when I'm chasing the wrong outcome. It reminds me I'm not the center. The mission is, humanity is, the future we're building is, to love what you love. That's not just spiritual poetry. It's the only antidote I've found to burnout. Because when I love what aligns with life, with truth, with growth, then the work sustains me. Even when it's hard. Even when the criticism is deafening. I've learned to love problems that matter. Climate change, space colonization, AI safety. These aren't convenient problems. They don't have fast rewards, but I believe they're worth loving. To do what you would have me do. This is the hardest line, because it means saying no to some amazing opportunities. It means not chasing every dream, just the one that's mine. I could have stayed in finance, made billions, but I was called to solve different problems. Electric vehicles, reusable rockets, brain-computer interfaces. They didn't seem rational when I started, but they felt like a calling. Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. If there's one line I return to daily, it's this. We live in a world obsessed with guarantees, but the biggest breakthroughs happen when you move without one. You start building the car before you know how to sell it. You start designing the rocket before you can land it. That's not recklessness, it's faith. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. This is where the peace comes from. Not from having no failures, but from knowing they serve a purpose you can't always see. I wanted quick success. What I got was deep character. I wanted certainty. What I got was wisdom. So no, this prayer isn't about passivity. It's about partnership. Between your effort and something bigger than you. Between your vision and a deeper wisdom. Between your plans and the unfolding of something greater. Forgiveness might sound like a soft skill, a sentimental detour, something better left to therapists and spiritual teachers. But for me, it's become one of the most radical technologies of the human spirit. Why? Because innovation demands risk. It demands failure. It demands people. And people, including me, mess up a lot. You can't build a future unless you're willing to repair the past. I've had to forgive co-founders who betrayed my trust. I've had to ask for forgiveness from teams I pushed too hard, too far, too fast. I've had to forgive myself for the things I said or didn't say, the moments I acted out of fear rather than love. Without forgiveness, you start building walls inside. First around your heart, then around your ideas, then around your willingness to try again. You get cynical, you get protective, you stop trusting. And when you stop trusting, you stop risking. And when you stop risking, you stop innovating. That's why forgiveness is not a luxury. It's a precondition for building anything meaningful. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering with freedom. I don't forget the deals that fell apart. I don't forget the attacks from the media. I don't forget the people who left when I needed them most. But I've learned to carry those memories without letting them harden my heart. Because when your heart hardens, so does your imagination. You stop seeing possibilities. You start expecting the worst. And that's not a mindset that builds Mars colonies. Forgiveness keeps the future open. Forgiveness keeps the mission first. Forgiveness keeps your soul in the game. Your plan is better than mine. Sometimes that plan includes heartbreak. Sometimes it includes collapse. Sometimes it includes walking away from something you spent years building. But in my life, every ending has been a beginning in disguise. PayPal's exit became the launchpad for Tesla. Tesla's near-death experiences made SpaceX stronger. The pain of public failure taught me to detach my identity from success. That's what forgiveness does. It teaches you that loss doesn't define you, it refines you. It doesn't mean the pain didn't happen. It just means the pain doesn't get the final word. Leadership without forgiveness turns into tyranny. I've seen brilliant people burn out because their leaders couldn't let go of a mistake. I've been that kind of leader, demanding, harsh, impatient, thinking that pressure alone would make diamonds. But I've learned something from physics and from people. Pressure without release eventually destroys. We need resilience, not rigidity, and resilience is what forgiveness makes possible. Forgiveness gives you room to breathe again, to think clearly again, to connect again, to build again. You might think a prayer is something private, something soft, something spiritual. But over time, I've come to see Grandma Corora's prayer as a decision-making framework, one that integrates emotion, logic, vision, humility, and courage into one unified process. It's more than words, it's a system. Let me show you how. Help me to see what you see. This is the vision filter. When I'm looking at a potential project, I ask, what am I not seeing? Am I being driven by ego or by service? Am I reacting out of fear or responding to actual need? In 2015, when we were considering the Gigafactory expansion, I was overwhelmed. Data everywhere, market projections, environmental impact studies, supplier logistics. But this line cut through the noise. It forced me to step back and ask, what does the world actually need? Not what will impress investors. Not what will boost stock prices. Not what will feel emotionally satisfying in the short term. The world needed a scalable path to sustainable energy. That perspective, not the spreadsheets, made the decision clear. To love what you love. This is the alignment filter. It's about aligning my motivation with something deeper than ambition. When I work on Neuralink, for example, I'm not driven by excitement about brain-machine interfaces as a concept. I'm driven by the belief that human consciousness, our ability to think, to feel, to wonder, is worth preserving. I don't love the hype. I love the potential to heal brain injuries, to give mobility back to paralyzed people, to create symbiosis with AI that might otherwise surpass us. That line of the prayer reminds me to love what serves life, not just what serves my legacy, to do what you would have me do. This is the purpose filter. You can do a lot of good things. You can't do all of them. I get pitched 100 ideas a week. Amazing ideas. Ideas that could make money, help people, change lives. But they're not all mine to do. This line helps me say no, not because an idea is bad, but because it's not aligned with my specific calling. And it helps me say yes to things that terrify me, like committing to making the Cybertruck even when people laughed at the design, even when traditional automakers dismissed it, even when we had no clue how we'd actually build it at scale. Because the deeper question isn't, can I? It's, should I? Give me the courage to follow where you lead even when I can't see the whole path. This is the action filter. It breaks analysis paralysis. Most people want guarantees. They want to know the outcome before they commit. But life doesn't work like that, and neither does innovation. With SpaceX, we had no guarantee of success. In fact, we had every indication of failure. But we had enough information to take the next step. Courage doesn't mean fearlessness. It means willingness to act without full clarity, to move without certainty, to risk without guarantees. This line of the prayer reminds me, you don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the next step and help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. This is the surrender filter. It's not about passivity. It's about releasing the illusion of control. Sometimes my plans have failed spectacularly, but in hindsight, they were always replaced by something better. Solar City merging with Tesla looked like a disaster in the press until it became one of our most strategic moves toward energy independence. The Falcon 1 failed 3 times until it didn't. And when it succeeded, everything changed. This line reminds me that my view is limited, that setbacks might be setups, that I can trust the process even when it doesn't go according to my plans. I don't just pray this when I'm afraid. I pray it when I'm deciding who to hire, when I'm choosing which partnerships to pursue, when I'm navigating conflict with people I care about, when I'm in the middle of a launch countdown and everything's riding on a single ignition. It's not magic. It's perspective. It's alignment. It's leadership. It's humility. And it's how I've made every major decision of my life. We live in a world obsessed with optimization. Optimize your workflow. Optimize your sleep. Optimize your relationships, your schedule, your meetings, your mental state. But wisdom isn't always efficient. Some of the most important lessons in my life came through delay, discomfort, and detours. And some of the most powerful guidance came not from data, but from silence. Grandma Karora never read a book on productivity. She never attended a single leadership seminar. She didn't understand code or financial modeling or rocket propulsion, but she understood people. She understood timing. She understood the quiet movements of the human soul. And in the end, isn't that what leadership actually is? Understanding what people need, even when they don't have the words to express it. Making hard choices even when there's no clear outcome. Carrying weight even when no one sees it. The voice that cuts through the noise. There are moments still when I doubt myself. I hear the critics. I read the headlines. I face setbacks that hit harder than I expect. And then in the middle of the noise, I hear that quiet voice. Help me to see what you see. It's not an escape. It's not avoidance. It's clarity. It reminds me that I'm not the center of the universe, but I am a participant in something vast and intelligent and unfolding. It reminds me that leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the clearest, the most grounded, the most aligned. It reminds me that sometimes all the algorithms in the world can't give you what a few words from someone who loved you unconditionally can. Passing it on, I've taught this prayer to my children, not because I want them to believe exactly what I believe, but because I want them to know there's always guidance available if they're willing to ask for it. I want them to know that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward even when the path is unclear. I want them to know that surrender isn't weakness. It's strength in its most evolved form. I want them to know that a quiet voice from a wooden chair in Pretoria can carry more strategic value than 1,000 data dashboards. Your turn. You don't need to adopt my prayer. You don't need to believe in a divine being to benefit from these principles. But maybe, just maybe, you need a moment of clarity right now. A moment of quiet that cuts through the noise. A moment of alignment that reminds you who you really are. A moment of courage that helps you take the next step even if the staircase is still invisible. Maybe your greatest breakthrough isn't on the next podcast or in the next book or in the next chat with your mentor. Maybe it's waiting in 26 words you whisper in the dark. Every morning before I check my phone, before I read a single email, before the world starts asking me to solve 100 problems, I pause and I say it. Dear God, help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do. Give me the courage to follow where you lead even when I can't see the whole path. and help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. Amen. 30 seconds. That's all it takes. And yet, those 30 seconds shape every launch, every strategy, every conversation, every failure, every breakthrough. It's not magic. It's alignment. It's remembering that I'm not doing this alone. It's the humility to admit that my view is limited and the strength to follow a wiser one. The most important inheritance. My grandmother didn't leave behind a fortune. She didn't give me a house or stocks or a trust fund. She gave me something infinitely more valuable. A way to listen, a way to lead, a way to live. I carry her with me in every decision, in every risk, in every moment when I choose courage over certainty. That 26-word prayer, it's not just a spiritual habit. It's the operating system behind every innovation I've built. Not because it tells me what to do, but because it tunes me into a deeper voice that already knows. Your guidance is waiting. If you've made it this far, I want to say this to you personally. You don't need to wait for a crisis to ask for guidance. You don't need to hit rock bottom before you align with something deeper. You don't need to understand everything before you take the next step. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is pause and ask. Maybe your version of the prayer is different. Maybe you don't believe in a higher power. That's okay. But what if you believed in wisdom? What if you believed in love? What if you believed in guidance, the kind that doesn't show up in spreadsheets, but in silence? Because sometimes, the most strategic move isn't another decision. It's a moment of surrender. If this conversation resonated with you, if it reminded you of someone you've loved or someone you've lost, if it gave you a framework for thinking about life, leadership, or decisions in a deeper way, subscribe to this channel. Not because I have all the answers, but because together we're asking better questions. We're building more than companies here. We're building clarity. We're building courage. We're building lives that are aligned with something bigger than ego and outcomes. So if that's the kind of guidance you want more of, hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes the smallest words, from the quietest voices, carry the greatest wisdom.